Hey everybody, it is Patrick McLain, as you know, one of your guest hosts for Reimagine 2020. You guys know we're doing this on Halloween, hence I'm rocking the Mario hat. Very excited for this guest. The theme of my day has been talking to really interesting, I think, investors that have unique perspectives. I was just telling, I'll introduce you in a second, Kyle, that I was just talking to Mark Yusko, and actually I'm curious to hear if they have some of the same views on things. But before I butcher it too much, I'm going to introduce Kyle Samani. First off, Kyle, how's your day? Where are you at? What's been the highlight of your week so far?
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for inviting me on the show. It is a pleasure to be here. How was my day? I had a great day. I slept well, woke up early, went to spin class. I had a bunch of phone calls. I've been on back-to-back phone calls kind of since then. So it's been a productive day. What's been the best thing that's happened this week? It is Wednesday, so we're about halfway through the week. The best thing that has happened to me this week is one of our portfolio companies just closed a really, really big deal. I can't announce what it is, but the big thing they've been working on got done.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
I'm super happy. I wish I could talk about it. They'll announce it probably in a few weeks.
Well, everybody listening, stay tuned. You guys will be hearing this in a few weeks when it goes live, so it might all make sense. But I didn't know much about you, to be honest, before I saw I was going to interview you, so I did a little bit of research. I asked some people. I've heard some very interesting things. I think it's very clear to me that you have a very unique vision, and I think you seem very focused. If I were to summarize it, and tell me if I'm butchering it, but you consider yourself co-founder, managing partner, Multicoin Capital. You guys describe yourself as a thesis-driven investment firm that invests exclusively in the crypto ecosystem, and you guys manage more than $100 million across 2 funds. That would describe your day job more or less?
I think that's the quick summary version, yeah.
All right, so before we get into detail on that, I want to know, how did you get into this? So can you take me, I know you had, a tech company in the past, maybe multiple, I don't know, but can you tell me, your evolution? Were you always interested in technology? That start young? What was kind of your vision, and what led you into blockchain or crypto?
Yeah, so I grew up here in Austin, Texas, which is where I live now, where MultiCoin's based. My dad's a computer scientist, so I kind of grew up with computers my whole life. I was pretty fortunate. I started programming when I was about 10 or 11 years old. He kind of taught me the ropes and got me going. Got really nerdy into hardware and gaming and all the kind of classic teenage boy things. When it came time to go to college, I went to NYU, studied finance. Thought I was too cool to be a programmer, so I was I'm going to go to business school and become a banker. About a year into business school, I realized that I hated banking and wanted to go into tech. So after college, I started working in tech. Moved back to Austin.
So were you a nerd? Would you consider yourself I'm a nerd? I always love technology. Is that how you would describe yourself?
I qualify as a nerd, yeah. Definitely. So came back to Austin, got into healthcare at the time. This was 2013. It was healthcare IT was a really hot space at the time. And I started I launched my first company in May of 2013. That company was called Pristine. Pristine built software for Google Glass for surgeons. I know Glass was kind of a stupid consumer product, but it was actually a very interesting tool for surgeons because surgeons work with their hands. They're gloved up all the time, right? And so I thought it would be very cool to build that software. Raised venture, grew to the team to almost 30 people. And then Google killed Google Glass, at which point I had a problem, as you might imagine. So pivoted the company, and the company was ultimately acquired in a small little acquisition for IP and talent and such. And I had to find something new to do with my life. And now it's early 2016. In March of 2016, I discovered this thing called Ethereum. And Ethereum is what really pulled me into crypto. The thing that drew me most to Ethereum, the fact that it was this open, decentralized platform that anyone could build on top of. I had experienced the pain of platform risk with Google and with Glass, so I understood what that meant in a very real way. And the appeal of a decentralized platform immediately clicked for me. So over the course of 2016, started reading more about Ethereum, about Bitcoin, the history of the space, cryptography, distributed systems, all these things. consensus algorithms and all that stuff, and just kind of fell in love more and more with the space. By the spring of 2017, I realized that I couldn't think about anything other than crypto. So I made the decision in the spring of 17 to launch MultiCoin. We launched our hedge fund on October 1st of 2017, and we launched our venture fund in July of 2018. Today, we have 9 people in the US and China on our team. We invest in private companies. We invest in teams that are going to launch tokens. We invest in stuff that's like public. So like, we own some Bitcoin, whatever, Ethereum, Litecoin, all that stuff. Like that's our investable universe, is kind of what's on coinmarketcap.com basically. And yeah, we have a ton of fun reading, learning, thinking, and placing bets in the space.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I guess my only question, as you said it, I would add is, so were you kind of in this lull point where you had exited a company, and were you actively working on crypto projects, or were you just kind of like enjoying hanging out for a bit and like keeping an eye on things and just waiting for your plan of attack? Or
so one thing I've gotten to know myself is I'm pretty not creative. I'm not very good at coming up with new ideas. I'm very good at taking an idea in front of me, thinking about it, critiquing it, modifying it to make it work better. And so when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next with my life, I was like, I just need more ideas. Like I just need ideas running through my brain. How do I get more ideas? And so what I did was I went to AngelList. This is early 2016. And I don't know if they still have this anymore, but at the time they had like tabs that if you had hit like startups, you could hit like, they had verticals, right? It was like ed tech and health tech and I don't know, like SaaS and whatever, autonomous vehicles and blockchain. Like they had all these different verticals. And so I made a rule that every single day I would click one of those tabs and go through 100 companies and just read about 100 companies and what they do. And my thinking was like, I would just get more ideas past my brain, and like I would think about those ideas, and like if any of them were interesting, that would cause me to go explore, other ideas and other tangents and such. And so I think it was the 3rd or the 4th day that I was doing that I clicked crypto or blockchain or whatever it's called, and started going down the list of companies. This is March of 2016, and I went through the list, and I remember like there were 5 or 6 companies that I saw that were building on top of Ethereum, and I had no idea what Ethereum was. And so I was like, okay, what's Ethereum? Like I keep seeing this word over and over again. So I started looking into Ethereum, and that's kind of like how I fell down the rabbit hole.
got it. So I guess I will ask, like, do you, like, in your journey, like, and so it sounds like you're in Google Glass, you're hardcore in this, you're relying on Google, and I understand what you're saying about like industrial use cases. I've always been surprised by, like, even if you look at HoloLens, whatever, if there was any progression from that whole initiative, it was that, like, I think people underestimate the constantly simulated tasks that people do with like visual guidance, that the system, that there was a world there. How do you jump from that to having a crypto fund? Like, was there anything in the middle? Like, because that's not like a normal journey for people, right? Like, did you had any investment experience before? Like, how did you get to the point of a fund?
Yeah, so there was a 1.5 years between Pristine and MultiCoin. It was a long time. I was unemployed for quite some time. I was fortunate that I was invested in crypto, and crypto kept going up during that time, so I didn't have a compelling need to get a job. Yeah, I was super. I was concerned for myself, quite frankly, at some point. I'm like, what am I doing? It's been a while since I've had a job. So I was non-trivial and like very difficult to figure out how to make that transition. In terms of, launching a fund, like I had no prior professional investment experience, never worked at a fund or anything. We just said like, let's go, like figure it out. We had no idea how to create a fund. Like we called up some friends and we're like, how do we do this? And like I introduced to some lawyers and, like went through the process, and we were real scrappy and like figured it out and started calling people that we knew that had some money, and we're like, hey, you want to invest in our fund? And they were like, what do you do? And we were like, crypto. And they're like, what's crypto? And I was like, all right, let's, and like, that's how we started, asking people for, $25,000, $50,000 at a time. That's what we did. And, iterated and learned along the way. Got very lucky along the way with some good calls, and met a lot of the right folks and got introduced to the right people, and kind of just grew our brand from there.
What was that? What was that first day where you realized like, oh shit, maybe we're on to something? Like, what was like the first validation you received?
Yeah, I would say the first time that I was like, this is real, like this is happening, was probably January of 2018, where we got into a couple of like really hot deals, and we were like able to get in those deals, and that was exciting. And then also in January of 2018, we got introduced to David Sachs and Bill Lee, who run Craft Ventures, and they were pretty excited about crypto, and they spoke with us, and they said they liked us and wanted to work with us. And so that was kind of my first like, okay, it looks like we're doing something right and figuring out something here in a real way. And that's when like the first moment that I was like, hey, this could really work.
And can you tell me a bit about like the driving force there? I mean, it sounds like from what I've heard, like I listened to an interview from recently, and I heard you describe like there's a mega thesis, or of Multicoin Capital, and there's maybe three components. You say open finance, Web3, non-sovereign money. Did you land on that immediately? Has it been an evolution? And what did you think that was unique about what you were about to approach, or your approach to the problem?
So when we first started, we didn't coherently have those three mega theses down in the way that we do now, and it's on our website. It took us a while to get that level of clarity. When we first started, we were excited about crypto, we were excited about smart contracts, and like we knew the space kind of sort of. We were lucky that in 2017, that's all you needed to get off the ground. Today, if you wanted to get off the ground, that level of knowledge and cohesion is not good enough. But it was then, because the market was just less mature. There's like, how we got there, I mean, it was just like a lot of thinking and like talking to people and like seeing patterns, and just kind of crystallizing all of that. So that was kind of like, there's no.
Can I pause you for one second? Can I pause you for 1 second? And I think especially for the students listening to this call, I think sometimes they don't understand how their journey is going to play out in life. But like, if I just heard what you described, it sounded like timing actually played a good role in your success, and that maybe it would have been a larger uphill climb today. Like, so is everything like panned out in life, or like what advice would you give to the students listening right now? Like, did you get lucky? Was it timing?
Extraordinarily lucky on multiple fronts, and timing is everything. It's hard to process on the outside whenever you read about anyone's story, like, and they're in Forbes or Fortune or whatever, right? Like, and the success story on the outside, it always feels like a straight line or like a straight-ish line from point A to point B. And like the reality is that it's never that. It's always like a crazy zigzag, and like you go in the wrong direction a bunch of times. That is definitely the case for us. There are so many things that happened that like we could have never conceived of that did. Some of which were bad and some of which were good. I think I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in superstition. Like, I believe deeply in statistics and science, given my job. But I do believe that you can create the opportunities for good things to happen. And I believe that is objective. So the probably simplest instantiation of this is just what I'm going to loosely call marketing. It's very unintuitive. Like, if someone tells you your probability of success on some given action is 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10,000, like, that sucks. Like, on the surface, that sounds like miserable and awful and it's terrible. Like, why would you spend any effort on anything if your probability of success is 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 10,000, right? Like, it's a wasted effort. What's weird about marketing is that if you can get some coverage for whatever your purpose or objective is, if you can do that in a good way, you can get 100,000 or 1 million eyeballs, or 10 million for that matter. Like, there's no upper limit to how much exposure you can get. And so if your quote unquote hit rate is 1 out of 1,000 and you get 100,000 impressions, then you just got 100 shots on target. And like, that is extraordinary, like how that math works. And it's extremely unintuitive. to like how you think on a day-to-day basis. Because 1 out of 1,000 is just like you ignore it and move on. But the correct thing to do is to say, no. Not I want a 1 out of 1,000, but how do I just take 1,000,000 shots really fast? And
it's
marketing,
like this saying, like, people, you miss all the shots you don't take, right? Like,
you don't take, yeah. And like what's the difference between sales and marketing? And sales is all about hand-to-hand combat, and it's about like picking up the phone and talking to a person or video chat or whatever, which is effective for closing a deal. But what marketing is about figuring out how do I get 1,000,000 shots on target. And marketing is much more powerful in that sense because it just the scale marketing provides. Like as one human, you only have 16 hours in a day that you're awake, and so there's only so many conversations you can have. But marketing, if you do it effectively, you can hit 1,000,000 or 10 million eyeballs, and that's level of scale that's really unprecedented. And so my recommendation to people is figure out how to think hard about messaging, marketing, communications. The most effective thing we ever did, and continues to be the most effective thing we do to this day, is writing. We're pretty well known among our peers for writing really in-depth analysis on our blog. And we started doing that early on. It was extremely successful, more so than we could have ever imagined. And it continues to be one of the most important things we do to this day.
well, and kind of tying back to that, do you mind elaborating, I guess, and I'm reading back to what I understand to be, maybe they've evolved, but kind of the pillars of your guys' thesis as a fund, like, can you mind elaborating a bit on those? And is that what influences, I'm assuming, your content creation? So you think that like getting that message out resonates?
Yeah, so what's the question? I'm not sure I grokked it, Patrick.
No, I'm just saying, like, I want to kind of tie it back, like, to just understand a bit more about Multicoin Capital, right? So, like, how do you define Multicoin Capital? What are your guys' kind of pillars? It sounds like you just define them as thesis. And is that kind of tie back to the content you create to kind of guide and like share with people your thoughts?
Yeah, so our 3 mega theses that are on our website are open finance, Web3, and the opportunity for non-sovereign money. It took us a long time to crystallize those 3, and each of those 3 is pretty big and pretty broad and has lots of subcomponents that I can't really get into today. The writing those down is good for marketing purposes, and that like it helps investors in our fund know what we do, and it helps entrepreneurs who we work with know what we think about and how we think about them. The other thing writing does is it forces clarity for yourself. And this is the thing that people probably don't appreciate about writing, is if you can't write something that is good enough to publish externally, that you would like think is, like, as an investor, basically my bar is this good enough that like people would give me money if they read it? Or as an entrepreneur, is this good enough that you read it and you want to take money from me? Like those are basically kind of my inputs and my outputs. And so my quality bar is if I cannot crystallize my thoughts to a quality bar such that I'm willing to publish it, where my goal is to convince one of those 2 parties to do one of those 2 things, then my thinking is not clear enough. And I need to refine my thinking more and be more clear to get there. And we've been very clear with ourselves early on about that bar, and we hold ourselves to, like, I think the highest bar we can on that front. And then we force that on all of our team members. And for all of our internal investment memos and documents and everything, like, we're very, very strict about that quality bar. We obviously don't publish everything we do. That is just for logistical purposes and other reasons we don't publish. But like everything we have internally is at the level of analysis that it could be published externally. And we're very firm about that.
Definitely. So, like, what really excites you today? Like, when you guys look at bets that you want to make, like, what are some things that like come to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting areas that we're really excited about. I think the most interesting thing happening in crypto right now is called Serum. Serum is a new decentralized exchange built on top of Solana. Full disclosure, we are investors in Solana and Serum. What's so cool about Serum is that it is a completely open, completely decentralized exchange that you can trade any asset in the world. Today it supports spot markets, and they're about to add synthetic assets in the next few weeks. Once Serum supports synthetic assets, you'll be able to trade synthetic exposure to any asset that has a publicly observable price feed anywhere in the world. So they'll be able to trade Apple or Google or Tencent or Alibaba or corn or wheat or oil, or it doesn't matter. Anything you can think of that has a publicly observable price can be represented synthetically on Serum. And like there's a lot of people all over the world who cannot access US equities, cannot access US equity indices, there's a lot of Americans, if you want to invest in Alibaba or Tencent, as an American, it's basically impossible to do that. It was very difficult. And like, so capital markets are fundamentally fragmented and fragmented across geographic borders. Synthetic exposure basically breaks those borders, and Serum provides really the first like real exchange and foundation that can be used for facilitating any kind of asset trading anywhere in the world. The thing we're really excited about to invest in is there's going to be, over the next few years, dozens of entrepreneurs, if not hundreds, all over the world who build front ends and businesses, basically localized brokerages that cater to local population, whether you're in Mexico or Canada or Indonesia or wherever, China, but like these people need to be onboarded. They need to have a user interface, a wallet, all these things so they can actually trade this stuff and access it. And we think there's going to be just a tremendous number of opportunities to increase global financial inclusion on like just a completely open, permissionless, decentralized synthetic asset platform. And Serum provides that foundation.
100%. I was talking to my friend, he was like one of the co-founders at Gojek. I live in Bali for a long time the other day, and even what they're looking at, I mean, I don't think people truly understand how these regional apps are clawing into every aspect, especially becoming banks, like from the drivers picking up food and supplying their own money, etc. But one thing you said I want to pull out, like Solana. So like when I ask people about you, like I always say like, oh, he's like one of the biggest investors in Solana. Do you think, is that one of the investments that you feel like kind of defines you now? And like, how do you view your role in the space, or like MultiCoin's role in the space, or like reputation or whatever?
Yeah, we are publicly very large investors in Solana. We are the largest investors and have been public backers for a long time, and we continue to hold it, and we're not going to sell anytime soon. We're big believers. Some people are annoyed by that because they think Solana is bad or stupid, and like, okay, that's their opinion. Like, that's fine. We'll see who's right and who's wrong fast, in a few years. But no ill will against anyone. The reason we're so excited is because it provides stability. So there's this really good Jeff Bezos quote that goes something like this. People ask me all the time, what do I think is going to change in the next 10 years? And that's a good question. But actually, I submit to you that the question they should be asking is, what is not going to change in the next 10 years? And I believe that is the more important question of the two. And the reason that the latter is more important than the former is that if you can bet on things that won't change in the next 10 years, that provides a stable foundation on top of which you can do things. And then Bezos goes on to provide some examples about like joking about like customers being like, man, I love Amazon. If only my packages were more expensive and slower. And like, obviously, like no one's ever going to say that. And so that is kind of being like that's like a North Star for Amazon, is like always faster and always cheaper, right? Like, and so when I look at Solana, the reason we're so excited is we look at the challenge of scaling blockchains. And it's an extraordinarily difficult technical problem, and there's a whole bunch of smart people working on it with a bunch of different perspectives. The Ethereum ecosystem today has proven a lot of very cool things, but there's just not a clear scaling path. The kind of, I'll call it core Ethereum foundation people and developers and such are talking about lots of things. They have rollups, they have sharding, they have a whole bunch of these things that they talk about. All of those technical solutions, like I expect will work and do the things they claim they do. I don't think they won't. But the net result is that today we do not know what it's going to look like for Ethereum to scale in 24 or 36 months. And it's not that I don't know and that I'm not smart enough. It's that there is no human on the planet that can answer that question with any certainty, because there's so many conflicting forces like doing different things on top of Ethereum, and like how all of these things are going to net out, and which one's going to win and why, and then there's a bunch of other weird second order implications from that. And so it's actually impossible to answer the question, what does the technology foundation look like in 36 months? It is objectively impossible to answer that for Ethereum. And what I love about Solana is Solana has a stable foundation that will not change. And if you have a foundation that will not change, then you can build on top of that. And we believe that that is the most important constraint to think about when thinking about long-term platform evolution.
So like when I hear Solana, I think just if I were to generalize it, it sounds like one of the contenders, at least perception wise, to like be an Ethereum killer, right? And obviously we've seen these before. But let's say that like that feature ends up positively, right? Like, and you guys are large or largest, I don't know, investor. What do you think was what do you think the ingredients that you had inside of Multicoin Capital, or your approach to finding companies, compelling companies that you want to invest in? Like, what do you think you guys had internally that allowed you to spot that before other people?
So I mean, it varies by investment. In the case of Solana, there's a whole bunch of like competitors to Solana: Ethereum, Near, Algorand, Infinity, a whole bunch of these things, Coda, a bunch of them. We made an outsized bet in Solana because we thought really hard about, this is like late 2017, early 2018. What are the applications on top of a blockchain that are the most useful? And at the time, there was one application that was just starting to emerge that we thought was going to be the most important application, and that was trading. In 2016, there was an exchange called EtherDelta that launched on top of Ethereum. It was like had all the whole into architectural problems and was slow and crappy for all kinds of reasons, but it worked. And it demonstrated that like two people could atomically trade assets without a trusted third party. And like that was a like step function improvement in what is possible in the world with financial assets. And then in late 17, a number of people iterated on that, primarily the 0x team and the Radar Relay team, and they launched the next generation kind of decentralized exchange that meaningfully improved on top of EtherDelta and made the experience much better, but still had a lot of architectural problems, which were like largely the fault of Ethereum's. And we saw the power and potential of that. And so as we started to look at alternative ways to scale, we said like our primary constraint was what design is going to be optimal for enabling trading assets at scale and running an exchange at scale. And if you think about the nature of running an exchange, there's three features you need. And if any of these three features are missing, the experience quickly degrades. And those three features are, you have to have high throughput. Like you're trading hundreds or thousands of assets, people are placing orders all the time. Like you just have to have a large amount of absolute throughput. Two, you have to have low latency. Like you can't have like people waiting 10 minutes to update their orders or even 20 seconds to update their orders. Like everything needs to feel, snappy. And the third is you have to have low transaction fees. And again, that's kind of obvious. Like people don't want to pay to post orders. So those three things have to be there to run a exchange. And the Solana team, when we met them in early 18, actually the first deck they ever sent us, the title was NASDAQ for blockchain, which was like really corny and like they don't use that messaging anymore. But like their focus from day one was, how do we build the like most performant blockchain that can support large scale financial trading? And we, I think, recognized earlier than most of our peers that trading was going to be the most important thing, and that you need to have the foundation, technology foundation that is hyper optimized for trading. And so that's what gave us the conviction to bet big on Solana.
Got it. What are you good at day to day? Like, what's your killer feature? Like, what are you better at than anyone else? Like that they can't kick you out and replace you when you get old. What's your moat?
I think my superpower is the ability to digest tremendous amounts of disparate information and synthesize it into English extremely quickly. I read 3 to 4 hours a day minimum. I'm shooting messages to all of my team, to our portfolio companies about X and Y and Z, sharing ideas, synthesizing all of the what I believe are the effects of these things and what's going on, and then writing up syntheses of these things, and whether it's investment memos or just strategy documents or whatever. and doing that at an extremely rapid pace all the time. I do that better than anyone that I know. And it's like a core part of like investing and like doing what we do.
Sounds like you almost perceive it as like a research type role.
I mean, like, I guess you can call my job research. Like, it's a big part of my job is to like know what's going
Like
on. And figure it out.
research plus translation.
Yeah, I mean, like we have analysts on our team who like, you know, sometimes there's like some topic. It's like, okay, we need to go dive into this thing, and like our analysts will go do that. I generally operate at a little bit higher level of just like my job is to know everything happening in crypto at all times. And like I do a pretty good job of that, I think. It's not possible to do that perfectly, but I strive to get as close to perfect on that as I can. And that requires 3 to 4 hours of reading per day across a range of publications, subjects, and such to kind of figure out everything that's happening.
Are there commonalities of like the type of topics that you pull out? Like, are there like some themes and what you're looking for?
No, it's always just like, I've always just been like a voracious reader. I'm very lucky that like I discovered tech blogs right around 2005-06 when they came out, like TechCrunch, I think it was 2005, Engadget, Ars Technica, all those things back then. Like I started reading tech blogs basically when they came out. And then like VCs and other people started blogging in like late, you know, like early 2010s. And I loved all of the content. And so I used RSS and like subscribed. I'm still an avid RSS user today. I know RSS is kind of dead, but like I live and die by RSS. I have in the last 12 years never missed a single day of my RSS feeder. Every single article that's come through my RSS, I read the headline, and if the headline is interesting, then I'll go read the article. That's probably an average of, call it 100 to 150 articles per day for 12 years, plus newsletters, plus Twitter, plus all the other shit that I read. So I'm just like really systematic about that. And I have a lot of accumulated knowledge over like just 10 years of doing that every day. And so as I read new stuff, like the neurons fire of like, oh, this is important for that thing, and whatever, right? And sometimes it just means I need to forward it to the right person so they know. Sometimes it means I need to write up a blurb. Sometimes it means I need to write up a document and share it. But I do all of that in very, very high speed.
I'm trying to understand you a little more now. But so I heard like a rumor, maybe it's true or not, that you manage, I'll read it, just that you manage to recruit big VCs that are often wary in the space, or maybe you're a conduit to like more traditional markets, and kind of as you're describing, being able to synthesize things down in digestible ways. So is that true? Do you feel like that's kind of become part of your role, and what does that process look like? What roadblocks do you run into?
I mean, as a investor in the space, I mean, obviously the people who invest in our funds are not in full-time in crypto for the most part. Some of them are, but most of them are not. And so we are kind of by definition a conduit for them, for like they want financial exposure to crypto. We obviously go figure out where to put the money and what to do. So in that sense, we're a bridge. We obviously also just do a lot of just general education for investors as well. There's a lot of folks who are not invested with us who are thinking about the space, learning, whatever. And we certainly do a lot of market education. It's just kind of organically what we do. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could say we bridge kind of traditional finance to crypto. I think that's probably an accurate statement. Not like that what's like our objective per se, but it's just kind of an organic output of what we do. I wouldn't say there's any roadblocks. I mean, it's just like the biggest thing is like, look, if you want to understand what is Bitcoin and like why is Bitcoin important, like you don't need to talk to me. Like there's enough smart people on the internet who've written about that. And like, okay, you kind of need to grok that. The time when it makes sense for traditional investors to talk to me is like, they're like, okay, I understand why Bitcoin is interesting and important. What else is there? And where we get involved is for people who want to go explore further. And so the primary roadblock for us educating investors is they are primed on Bitcoin and like they understand why it matters, and they have a fundamental curiosity and interest in going further. And if someone has those two things and like they're looking to invest in the space, then like it's usually the right time for us to talk to them. I'm not sure I answered your question, but maybe that's what you're asking.
No. And I guess just to play off that, like I remembered I read something earlier. I was listening to you talk, and I heard you say that like one of the things that surprised you the most when you started talking to maybe more institutional investors is just how open people were around kind of thinking that non-productive assets are dumb, or that like gold is dumb to a certain extent. And maybe it was like a little bit of an eye-opening experience for you. Do you mind kind of like closing that gap when we're talking, I guess, in theory of talking to more traditional investors and how they're kind of perceiving the space and the myriad of options that are out there?
Yeah. So if you look at the total wealth in the world, there's something like 700 or 750 trillion dollars worth of wealth in the world that lives across like a few major asset classes. The largest is real estate. Next largest is probably debt markets. Next is equity markets. Then probably fiat currencies. And then like after that, it's like commodities. And so that kind of collectively is called like 700 trillion or 750 trillion, something like that. Of those, gold is about 8 trillion, like total is gold. So gold is like a pretty small percent. Call it it's 1% of like global, net worth, global value stored in gold. If you include fiat currencies, I think all the fiat currencies combined add up to something like, call it 75 trillion or something. So gold plus fiat currencies, let's just round up to call it 100 trillion for simplicity. So somewhere between 1/7 and 1/8 of the world's assets are in non-productive assets. The other major asset classes, real estate, debt, and equity, are all productive assets. They produce cash flows of some form. So like we know just on like a raw capital allocation basis that the vast majority of people in the world choose to store their wealth in productive assets as opposed to unproductive assets. And that ratio is about, call it 85%, plus or minus. And 15% is non-productive. So when capital allocators look at crypto and Bitcoin, they are like, okay, it's a non-productive asset. So that kind of just immediately like puts it in this small bucket, like just already it's right there. Guys like Warren Buffett's probably the most famous guy who like publicly is like, gold is stupid. And like he's gone on television and been like, gold is dumb. You should not own gold. Why? Because gold is a rock and like you can put it there and you can come back in 50 years and in 50 years it's a rock and it's just there and it's done nothing. Like, why would you own this thing that's done nothing? And like his description is like obviously correct. Like no one's expecting the gold is going to do anything. It's just going to sit there. Right.
You could make a valid argument for this.
Yeah. So like his argument is not wrong. Like it's like objectively correct. Other people have just a different vantage point about like the nature of fiat currencies and like the valuation or whatever, and therefore they choose to own gold as some sort of hedge. And that represents, call it $8 trillion or so of assets around the world. So like the thing is, like I just realized when I talk to most large scale capital allocators, like people who like they think in single digit billions is like barely registering for them. Like people who are managing at that scale, like they, for the most part, from my observations, don't care about non-productive assets. Their job is to focus on productive assets. And so they just look at Bitcoin and digital gold and they're like, yeah, it's just dumb. I just don't care. And like, there's nothing you can say or do that's going to change their minds. And those capital allocators, my sense is they represent the substantial majority of capital on the planet, or people who match the description that I just described. Does that mean they won't invest in Bitcoin? Like, no. They might say, look, enough smart people keep telling me to invest in Bitcoin, so I will do it. Like, that's totally plausible, but it doesn't mean they believe in it. And if they don't believe in it, then the probability that they increase that beyond, call it 1% exposure is unlikely. So I think that's kind of like the biggest existential growth cap for Bitcoin, is that like people just like large scale capital allocators do not care. And there's no way to test that theory. My theory could be wrong. It's just like something I've observed in my conversations that I think is like not discussed among people in the crypto community, because everyone in the crypto community just says rah Bitcoin. Which again, like I'm all for Bitcoin, like it's fine. It's just the reality is it's not a productive asset. What I think is really interesting about smart contract platforms like Ethereum and Solana and these other things is they have both they have the same effective cryptographic foundation as Bitcoin, like same math and stuff. They have very similar monetary properties. They're not quite as, call it sound as Bitcoin, but like they approach 98 or 99% as a sound as Bitcoin. But then they have all this utility with all these like smart contracts and fancy widgets and stuff they can do, which is very cool and interesting and useful. And they can be productive assets. They can actually produce exogenous cash flows, which is the most interesting thing. And so by making them a productive asset, I think you dramatically expand the capital base in the world that can justify owning them on an intellectual basis. And the market at large does not yet think about Ethereum or Solana or any of these things as productive assets. In fact, today, I don't believe they are productive assets, but I understand that 5 years from now, that will become like widely understood for some very interesting reasons. And on that basis, I think those assets are particularly well positioned to capture like the trillions of dollars of capital out there that could flow into the asset class.
Very well said. And I think there are these small, minute things, maybe not minute, but like unsaid things that are probably stopping this market from catching fire, right? And unique perspectives like yours probably need to get said or amplified more. But I know we're gonna get close here to the end, and I want to respect your time. So I have one last question or kind of topic, and then let you kind of take us out however you want. But I don't know why I was telling you I just interviewed Mark Yusko before this, and last conference I didn't do any. This one I just picked up some I wanted to do, some friends or whatever. And I asked him a question. I actually think it might be good for you. But all right, so it could be the traditional markets or the world. I mean, obviously, like the world went nuts since February, March with COVID. Markets dropped, or March, April. It looks like cash is being printed. No one knows what's going on. Does this have an effect on the crypto world? If I asked for Kyle Salmani's State of the Union, what would you give, like in the spirit of the political season? What assessment would you give of the world right now, and how does that tie back into crypto? Like, are normal markets on fire? What do you see coming, and does it help or hurt? Kind of the point of this conversation.
I have learned the hard way that I'm not good at timing markets, so I generally try not to make timing-based assessments, or at least not broad-based market-based assessments. I do idiosyncratic things that I'm more comfortable doing timing assessments, but like broad-based market ones, I'm not qualified for. So what will the price of Bitcoin be in 12 months or 24 months? I have not the slightest clue, and I don't attempt to know. I think, so I don't know if I can comment there. I think there is a general lack of trust about like the state of the world. And I think this is true at like many levels. So like a basic monetary policy level, like Jerome Powell, who's the the head of the Federal Reserve, went on TV like a month or two ago and said, we will print unlimited money. If inflation goes over 2%, that's okay. And like no central bank chair in modern history has gone on national television and said that. And like he did. And so that just is like a large new unknown in like financial markets. And like no one really knows how that's going to play out or what it's going to mean or what it's going to do. But like, is that dissolving trust in institutions? I don't know, maybe. There are at least some people who that scares them and they're like, you're devaluing my dollars and this is bad and scary. And so like there's some dissolution of some trust there among some segment of people.
Can I ask on that point, like, who do you think is actually like has distrust? Like, do you think average people, just like average citizen, like middle class person, do you think they're really paying attention to that? They have any idea what's going on?
No, they don't care, and they shouldn't care because it's not relevant to their day-to-day lives. One of our portfolio CEOs, his family grew up in Soviet Russia, and he immigrated here when he was a kid. And he texted me the other day, and he said, my grandma just texted me asking me how to buy Bitcoin because she's scared the government's printing too much money, and she understands that Bitcoin is digital gold.
Last year I bought all the rights to Bitcoin for Christmas, and no one was like, why are you doing this? I'm like, just set my whole dev team off, like made guides for like how grandma could give Bitcoin as a Christmas present. Like this is coming. Like I made it out of frustration because I don't want to get asked about it. Like, hey grandma, like here's the guides. Like,
I think generally people who have grown up in America are like the least well positioned to understand this particular concept, because America, if you are alive and you grew up in America, like we haven't had a monetary crisis of any form. But like if you zoom out, basically anywhere else other than like parts of Western Europe and America, like they've had some sort of monetary crisis in the last 60 years. And so like that's like a scarring thing for people.
And you're not counting 2008. Like you think 2008 doesn't even rise to that?
Monetary crisis is like, oh my God, the government is collapsing, and like I have paper that is theoretically worth something, and I no longer believe it's worth anything. And in 2008,
The Venezuelan problem.
Yeah, no one actually thought that in 2008, not in America. But like a lot of
FDIC did change the placards at the bank counters from, I think it was 100 or 150,000 to 250,000 deposit insurance.
That's right.
I think many people forget about.
Yeah. But like in China and large parts of Latin America, large parts of the Middle East, there's been real crises. And so those people understand better, I think, than Americans do. Like I think several billion people understand that pain in a real way, the way that 330 million Americans largely do not. So that's kind of point A of like lack of trust in institutions. I think the other one is just like, and this is partially is just like, I don't know what to believe anymore. Like in this, like COVID especially. I know like I can read a headline, whether it's on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, doesn't matter where, or even The Economist or the FT, and like I actually no longer believe what I'm reading. Not in that like the author is actively trying to manipulate me. Like it's not some sort of explicit like coordinated manipulation scheme. That's not what it is. It's the facts are unknown, but the journalists are unwilling to admit that, and they present the facts as if they are known and understood, and that creates false certainty among huge percentages of the population. And then those things are now being undone, which creates distrust in the media. So like a lot of good examples are on COVID. One is like what's it called, flatten the curve thing. Like that turned out to have been mostly nonsense. Like what's it called, CDC with like masks being bad, right? Like there's been countless, the World Health Organization saying like it's not a problem. Like a lot of large scale institutions have said outright false things, and then how the media has reported them on them has been worse. And so people are realizing that like, wait a minute, you said this 30 days ago, 90 days ago, that's not correct. And it's creating immense amounts of distrust. And so like, I really genuinely don't know what to believe about like, what is the state of COVID? Like, I don't even know how to answer the question. Like, I understand there are statistics about like the number of cases by city and county and whatever. And it's not that, again, the government's like explicitly lying to manipulate the numbers. It's just that like, it just doesn't matter because some people aren't getting tested. There's weird other incentives for people to report things. And so I just don't believe the numbers. And I just don't know what to believe. And I think an increasing percentage of people are feeling that way.
I mean, do you think the discrepancy in news or facts kind of is more systemic across like politics, things that are affecting monetary policy? Like, do you think that's a trend that extends further, or COVID is specific because scientists are coming up with answers as quickly as they can, maybe prematurely, and they're not holding all of their research and releasing it only once they're 100% sure?
I don't think it's like localized to just politics or just to COVID. I think COVID is the best example, but it is not the only example. I don't fault the scientists. I don't even necessarily fault the journalists. It's just the incentives of the media organizations is to publish things with some sense of certainty, even when they should not. Some scientists do go say stupid things on national television, which is bad. That's not the majority of scientists. It's just like, but it creates false certainty. And then when you break that certainty and change course, then you break public trust. And that's the problem. Is in my lifetime, I can't remember anything where there was so much unknown and like things were changing, like reversing course all the time. And like even the experts don't know the answers. And it's like the most important thing that impacts literally every facet of everyone's day all the time. I don't think there's ever been anything that's had that level of impact.
The most intriguing example I've heard is actually like in the 80s, like HIV AIDS epidemic. It was like this public, people were scared, they didn't know what it was at first. It was something, it was bad for you, right? Like and there was just a bunch of like stereotypes, misconceptions until they finally truly understand what it was. And I think this one is tough because, you know, in other aspects you could say, okay, you could blame bankers, you could blame this economic crash, right? But I think this thing just permeates down all the way to people's jobs, right? Where why is my restaurant closed? Why is this closed? And everything kind of hinges around this one topic that like there will be an end to this pandemic or an end to this coronavirus, maybe a vaccine or something. And you know, and like you said, I think we had played enough games with social streams and curated news and amplifications of things we didn't know were facts or not, that this is like really the outcome, right? And really uncertainty is kind of part of the equation here.
But yeah, I think that's right. It's just there's just too much compounding uncertainty in weird ways, and it's just not been something the world has experienced or understood how to process. And our institutions are largely failing us in helping people try to process that uncertainty. They are trying to promise certainty when they should not be. And by promising certainty and then violating that, that's how you break trust.
So like, what is your approach now? I mean, like, have you just tuned out and you're like, I'm not going to listen to this anymore because I don't know the trust, or you're like, you're going to dig deeper, or where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, like, I like vaguely follow the news, but like, I assume I cannot forecast or predict anything. I assume what I see is not correct, and then just operate like with a large, saying, okay, like there's just a large case of outcomes that are like here, and like as long as my decisions are not breaking those assumptions, I'm okay. But I just try not to project it or understand that or forecast it in any way. It's just, it's beyond me.
Got it. Well, hey, I know we're running to our last minute here. I appreciate your time. It was very nice talking with you. I know it's the first time we've talked. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Take us out if you want. What's on your mind? For the thousands of students watching, general crypto people? I know Coca-Cola, Anheuser-Busch, investors are watching this. Like, what do you want to say?
I mean, I want to say have a good day. That got kind of deep and like real philosophical. So I just kind of want to wish everyone to have a good day.
I'm wearing a Mario hat. I can't get too deep. Come on, like I never wrong.
I did feel weird getting all existential while you were wearing a Mario cap. You asked me a hard question, so I gave you a hard answer.
I'm gonna edit it. I'll just be hitting coins here right now. Like, it'll be great. But hey, Kyle, it was very nice talking to you. For everybody watching, we're at some point here of 72 hours. It's Halloween. Hopefully you guys are having a great day, a great night, whatever time zone you're seeing this in. Really enjoyed this conversation. I heard a lot of really good things about you before, Kyle. Clearly you're sharp. Don't need to tell you that. And appreciate your time and hope to see you again.
All right. Hey, Patrick, thanks for having me on the show. Take care.